Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the JAK Post Spotlight, the Jakarta Post webinar in talk show format. Today, we will talk about expanding investment in the region in relation to Indonesia's role as chairman of ASEAN. From Jakarta, I'm Divya Kariza, and I will be your host for the next hour or so. The Indonesian government has noted the important contribution of investment towards the country's economy and is committed to improving competitiveness and investment climate for both local and foreign investment. This is not only true for Indonesia, but also for other ASEAN member states. Despite the loss of foreign direct investment during the pandemic in 2020, the number has slowly increased for all ASEAN member nations since 2021, cementing the region's place as a major FDI destination in the developing world, making Southeast Asia a vital region in driving global economic recovery. So today we are delighted to be joined by an esteemed panel of experts to discuss the investment opportunities in the evolving economic climate of Indonesia. Here we have joining from Zoom meeting Pak Nurul Ikhwan, the Deputy Minister for Investment Promotion at the Ministry of Investment. He has been with the ministry since 2018, serving for various positions, from Director of Investment Planning for Services and Economic Zones, Regional Promotion Facilities, and most recently, the Deputy Chairman for Investment Planning. Good morning, Pak Ikhwan. Happy to have you here. And next, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have Ibu Mita. Bu Mita is the Director of the Foreign Service School Education and Training Center and the Secretary of the Field on the team for the acceleration of economic recovery in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Beginning her career in 2003, Bu Mita has held several positions throughout the year, including Director of the Foreign Service School. She previously worked as the Directorate for Economic Development and the Environment, as well as Directorate for Intra-Regional Cooperation in Asia Pacific and Africa. Thank you for joining us today, Bu Mita.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, we have Pak David Fernando Audi. Pak David is currently the Legacy Lead for ASEAN Business Entity and the operating partner at East Ventures, where his role is to work together with tech founders and team in managing various aspects of their business and value creation. With 20 years of experience in various industries under his belt, his notable experiences include CEO of PT MNC Tbk, Director of PT Global Mediacom Tbk, founder of OKZone.com, and Board of Commissioner member of PT Matahari Department Store Tbk. Glad to have you here with us, Pak David.
Yeah, morning.
And before we proceed, I'd like to invite the audience to send in some questions through the Q&A box in Zoom. And don't forget to state who you are addressing in the questions too. Also, an exciting gift awaits for the top 3 curated questions because you'll be awarded 1 month of the Jakarta Post digital subscription. Okay, so we shall proceed with today's talk show. In the first session, we will cover the current investment climate of ASEAN member states. So, addressing Pak Ikhwan from Zoom meeting, the first question for Pak Ikhwan would be, does the policy of a country correlate with the investment performance in ASEAN these days, and how is that so?
Yeah, I guess it has a very close relations, the policy coming from the member countries of ASEAN into the investment attracted coming to the countries. And maybe the thing that we could just give a kind of a showcase example is about Indonesia, like the one that we did with the omnibus law that issued by the government based on the guidance coming from the president, that we compile from 79 laws that we have in Indonesia, those with the articles that are not supportive enough into the creations of sound climate of investment, then we just revoke it and replace with the one that is very supportive with this. And this gives a kind of improvement that the response coming from the investors, it is quite positive, even very positive. They appreciate us with this, and they see that some improvement on this, giving a kind of better easiness of doing business in Indonesia, and having also faster process and procedures in having or getting the license from us. And on the other side, the policy that is related with how the government will guide and navigate the policy coming from the government, especially in terms of economic policy and in investment especially, this gives also a kind of guideline into the investors. Because we know that when the government having a kind of priority into some sectors to be highlighted and to be promoted, it will be followed by some incentives. And the combinations between these policies, then this will give a better hope and better investment climate. And of course, this will create finally a better, a kind of prosperity for all, including the beneficial aspect of the business in Indonesia.
Thank you so much, Pak Ikhwan. You shared a little bit about like how Indonesia is better positioned to get the opportunities from all the investments that's coming to the country. And related to the geopolitical conflict that's taking place worldwide right now. So how will this affect the performance in the region itself?
We know that for the sound investment climate creations, this will be contributed by various variables, of course, like let's say social, political, economical, of course, cultural, and also security variables that will be considered by the investors to do this kind of investment in this region, and especially in every single country in ASEAN. And for this, we could see that political stability playing a very significant role. We know that in ASEAN countries, we have some of them having still conflict internally, but in the general, ASEAN is one of the most stable region in the world. So that's why even though we have the situations in one or two countries in Indonesia which is not stable, but it is covered by other member countries. So then in general, image about ASEAN before the eyes of the investors, it is very stable country. But if we go into detail, then we see that the countries that are still having issue politically or security situations that is not sufficient enough, they are not a good recipients of inflow of investment. So it means that even though in a general, in global, ASEAN as a region is showing a good performance, but going into detail, the countries that they cannot catch up with the standard or the common situations in ASEAN, they are going to be left behind. So this is about the time for Indonesia having chairmanship of ASEAN to give a kind of suggestions and to invite also the countries having this kind of unstable political situations. They need to change the situations to be more stable if they don't want to be left behind by other ASEAN countries. And we need this moving together into the better level as a spirit of ASEAN. So we don't want to have any single country in ASEAN member to be left behind by us.
Thank you so much, Pak Ikhwan. Perhaps for Bumita, the next question would be, is foreign investment on the list of things that will be discussed in the upcoming ASEAN Summit?
Okay, so we will soon have the upcoming ASEAN Summit, which will be held from the 5th until the 7th of September. I think the outcome of this summit itself will be a testament of the hard work that we've been doing here throughout the year as the chair of ASEAN, together with the other ASEAN country, especially in maintaining peace and stability in the region. I think Pak Ikhwan has said very well about the importance of peace and stability, and we think that ASEAN as an organization has much contributed to that. Now, in terms of what we envision for the ASEAN Summit, we hope that there will be a leaders' declaration, which is called the ASEAN Leaders' Declaration on ASEAN as an epicentrum of growth. That document will showcase all of the commitment of the leaders in advancing economic growth for the region, especially in times of current condition after the pandemic. Now, one of the issues that is covered in the Leaders' Declaration will be on investment. Now, we are very well aware that to realize our vision to create ASEAN as an epicentrum of growth, we need a robust trade condition as well as investment environment, and those kind of things will be very important for us to attract sustainable investment as well as high quality investment in the region. So we hope that in the Leaders' Declaration, all of the documents related to investment will be reflected in there, especially the work that has been done at the technical level until the summit.
Thank you so much, Bumita. Next, to Pak David, because we are talking about the investment in ASEAN. Looking at the region as a whole, how is it the current investment climate in the region?
Yeah, so ASEAN has emerged as the fifth largest economy with nominal GDP of over $4 trillion, 650 million population, and 70 million MSME, which contribute to 85% of the ASEAN employment and 45% of ASEAN GDP. And not to mention, we have 200 billion of potential digital economy. So booming population expansion, increasing liberal trade policies, peaceful geopolitical stance have resulted in faster than average GDP growth in the region. And then, you know, the weather also great in ASEAN. And ASEAN economies have been attractive FDI destination in recent years. Multinational corporations are increasingly looking to Southeast Asia as an alternative production hub, attracted by its competitive wages, improving business regulation, infrastructure, increasing domestic demand. And this nation in general also provide an attractive alternative for companies looking to reduce their exposure to geopolitical tension in light of the increasing trade barrier, or just for the desire to simply find a cheaper production sites. So as such, ASEAN economy will likely to continue a strong growth trajectory for the next decades and is destined to be the future epicenter of global growth, which is the theme of this 2023 ASEAN Business Advisory Council Indonesia Chairmanship.
Thank you so much, Pak David. We are talking about the great opportunities and the potential that the ASEAN businesses hold at the moment, but can we explore a little bit more about which sectors are the most promising sectors in ASEAN right now? Perhaps for Pak David and Bumita as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of sectors, like almost all sectors are like very potential to be invested in ASEAN. But I think we want to focus on the sector that we need the most. Yeah, what is that? First, digital transformation. We have so many population, and which is like a very potential for digital monetization and digital connectivity. Second, what is also matters for us, food resilience. Yeah, we have 650 million people that need adequate supply of food. So food resilience is very important. And then the third, health resilience. We have experienced that during the last pandemic, we were not the first region to receive vaccine. So going forward, health resilience is very important. Health is wealth. And then there is trade and investment facilitation as well to basically maximize the potential of FDI towards ASEAN region, because this is what we need the most to basically ensure that we have the best potential for the next decades.
Okay,
thank you so much, Pak David. And what about Bumita?
Okay, so first of all, we should also look into the macroeconomic condition of ASEAN, I think, which is faring much better than any other region in the world currently. In terms of data, I think in 2023 we're expecting to grow at 4.9%, and 4.6%, and in 2024 we're about to grow at 4.9%. So it shows that in terms of promising region, I think we may deliver better. In terms of the FDI inflow as well for the region, I think we have recorded an all-time high at 224.2 billion in 2022. Now the question really, as you mentioned it, and I think I also agree to what Pak David says, I think there's a lot of potential in digital economy. In fact, according to data from the ASEAN Secretariat, there are 3 emerging trends of investment in the region. The first one being investment in digital transformation, the second on green sector, I think we've heard about the importance of green infrastructure, green growth and such, and also achieving our NDC. And third is actually the investment on EV industries. Now, what do we have in ASEAN that can actually support all of this? First of all, in terms of the digitalization, we have the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement that will be negotiated starting from at the end of this year. And in terms of the EV, there will be an ASEAN Leaders Declaration on developing regional electric vehicle ecosystem in ASEAN, and that will be one of the documents that will be agreed in this for the third summit.
Thank you so much, Pak David and Bu Mita. So we know that from the previous insights that there are a lot of exciting businesses opportunities in ASEAN right now. And now we will circle back to Pak Ikhwan. Pak Ikhwan, does the policy of a country correlate with the investment prospects as of now?
Yeah, I guess this has quite relevant. If I just could give a kind of example and also link it into the statement and explanations coming from Bu Mita. So that is right, that when we talk about regional EV ecosystems, this is something that Indonesia is leading for the sectors. Why? Because we have already started before other member countries of ASEAN started doing this kind of policy. So when we talk about this EV, because we know that the policy coming from the government of Indonesia, it was started by actually of more having downstream industry of our mineral resources. In this case is about nickel. So by having this policy, we could see that the attractions of investment into the ecosystem of EV battery especially, it is showing a very significant result. So for the current situations, we have already very close deal with some producers of this EV battery. So we are dealing with LG. We are also in negotiations with BASF. We are also negotiating with other companies coming from France and also from other European countries, and not limited as well from the companies coming from America. So by having the policy of Indonesia for having more downstream industry and to be part of global ecosystem of EV, and in this case is for the EV battery especially, so we are going to have a very close relevancy between the policy of the government with this downstream industry and the attracting investment coming to Indonesia. And this investment is bringing a very huge capital, and we could see that the market for this business is open very wide. And whoever will be the country having a kind of policy and having the capacity and technology in developing of EV, then they cannot avoid Indonesia to be their partner. And this case is also not closed only for Indonesia. Other ASEAN countries, they could have also similarity in terms of the policy, because when we talk about this nickel, Indonesia and also the Philippines, we have this capacity as well, even though the capacity in the Philippines is much more lesser than the one we have in Indonesia. But at least we know that the policy from Indonesia and the policy coming from, let's say, Vietnam, for example, which is very advanced in terms of creating of green energy supply, which will be related with the ecosystem of power generations based on the green technology. So they are leading in this region for this. And for this policy from Vietnam, this attract more investment into this energy in the Philippines. And when we talk about, let's say, Thailand, with the policy of having in automotive industry policy, that they provide a very good incentives and also policy and connectivity inside of Thailand as a kind of ecosystem for these productions, it has also a good impact into attracting automotive industry to come to the Thailand. So from these examples, we know that the policy coming from the government, this could lead the business sectors to be having a very sound situations, and they could prosper together with us because of the correct and right policy. And this policy should be then designed based on the strength of every single country of member countries of ASEAN. So then for Indonesia, which is very rich with these natural resources, having more downstream industry, not only for nickel, but other natural resources coming it from, let's say, the policy coming from us, that we would like to have the 8 sectors that we have with 21 commodities in Indonesia that we plan to have more downstream industry to be in Indonesia, then this will attract more investment into these commodities for the downstream industry will be coming much more better in the future.
Thank you, Pak Ikhwan. Very interesting to know that the downstreaming efforts have been taking place in other ASEAN countries and not just Indonesia right now. And related to the geopolitical conflicts that's happening all around the world right now, how do you think that it affects these efforts in ASEAN countries right now?
Yeah, this kind of, to my understanding, to my sense, it is blessing in disguise. It doesn't mean that we are having a very bad hope in many other part of the world. They are having conflict forever, so then we could take advantage for this conflict. But this is the norm that will be followed by investors or by business players. So stability is the key factors for them to come to our country. So we could see then, if we see the conflict between, let's say, China and the United States in terms of a trade war of them, and between European Union and America in one side together, facing the Russia with the conflicts in Ukraine, and also the competitions between United States and also European in dominating of global supply. It is also another thing. So we could see this from the policy they are having. We know that a Green Deal that is coming from the European Union as a kind of response from the IRA that was issued by the government of the United States. So this war of policy is creating also instability and also disrespect between those who are having this kind of part of this conflict. So in these situations, I should say that Indonesia is currently recognized as a very good boy. We don't have any conflict with any country. If we do have this, then this conflict is not escalated into the worst level. So in this case, whether it is America, European Union member countries, or even China, they have interest to be closer to Indonesia. And this is indicated by the signals that many of the planning coming from the China, for example, they would like to relocate their investment at home to be in ASEAN countries, and so far Indonesia is the priority for them. Why Indonesia? Because Indonesia is recognized on top of the stability. Indonesia is recognized maintaining a very good relations with any country. So they need also this good boy to be close to them to create better image of them before the eyes of their competitor. So this is also some momentum that we have to take advantage firstly to create the better policy and invite any parties to sit together and work together with Indonesia to supply the demand of the world with the strength of commodities and technology and investment that we are going to collaborate.
Thank you so much, Pak Ikhwan. That was a very enlightening session, especially about the struggles that all the ASEAN countries are facing to push their downstreaming efforts. And thank you so much for your insights. Unfortunately, Pak Ikhwan needs to leave us first right now. Thank you, Pak, for sharing your insights and being with us today. Thank you for your contribution, which has been invaluable. We eagerly look forward to your return someday in the near future. Thank you, Pak Ikhwan.
And I thank also Ibu Mita and Pak David Fernando. Thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Thank you.
So next, we'll be focusing on ASEAN and its diverse climate. But before we get to it, here's a short video from the Ministry of Investment. We'll be back for our second segment soon. In the meantime, don't forget to fill out our feedback form that can be seen on the chat box. And 3 lucky winners will be selected at random for a free digital subscription for a month. This is, of course, in addition to the free certificate of participation for all of you.
While the world is slowing down and darkness is looming with uncertainty and vulnerability on the horizon, we cannot and must not cave in. Instead, we continue to move, moving to survive and thrive, moving together for a better world. As the home of 1/5 of the global nickel reserve, Indonesia is ready to be the epicenter of the global electric vehicle battery industry. We tap into and manage our abundant resources well for the benefit and sustainability of the world and turn into a bright spot amidst the global economic slowdown and is poised to emerge as a powerhouse of the future. As the producer of half of the global palm oil, we contribute to a myriad of goods that everyone cannot live without. With over 270 million people, Indonesia is projected to be the fourth largest economy in the globe by 2050. Indonesia offers 75% of global carbon credit potential from forests, mangroves, peatlands, seagrasses, and coral reefs. As one of the world's largest sources of bauxite, we play a critical role in the world harnessing solar energy. We also improve our natural resources management. We aim greater value addition at a greener and more sustainable world to ensure that generating prosperity goes hand in hand with safeguarding our environment, fostering welfare based on inclusive partnerships, striving for future generations. Until 2030, more than half of the new power capacity additions in Indonesia will come from renewable energy as we move to continuously improve our investment climate through easy-to-use and digitally accessible business licensing services, fiscal incentives that support businesses, integrated industrial zones. All are underpinned by competitive human resources. Indonesia is a country with the world's fourth largest population, with immense diversity and maintained stability. Together, we continue to move to build a brighter future. Indonesia is a country on the move. Endless growth, endless opportunities.
Good morning, everyone. So we will now resume our discussion with the second segment on ASEAN and its diverse climate. So the first question will be for Pak David. Can you discuss a little bit about the different policies between member countries? Which country would you say is the most attractive to foreign investors?
Yeah, so far for the ASEAN FDI destination in FDI destination in ASEAN, Indonesia has been one of the country that attract most of the investment from FDI. Yeah, and then you have Vietnam as well for the second position. Then of course there are Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. I think in terms of every country have their own incentive. Like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand has been introducing a tax break to attract FDI, and then Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, they have designed certain incentive to also attract investment. So each of the country in ASEAN have unique characteristic, and they attract different investment as well. But I think in terms of the ASEAN region as a whole, again, we are remain very attractive. Yeah, I would like to actually brought up one topic. Yeah, because just now Pak Wamen have mentioned about FDI towards the ASEAN region. So the FDI has been increasing in the past 10 years. With the peak before the 2022, it happens in 2019, was 183 billion. And then it was down due to the pandemic to 135. Of course, now it's back up again above the pandemic. But what is most interesting is the intra-ASEAN investment. So despite the decline during the pandemic, the intra-ASEAN investment is actually increased. However, the intra-ASEAN investment is still a very small part of the total FDI, which now is about 15 to 17% of the total 183 billion in 2019, and about 17% in 2021, which is at 23 billion. And I don't know the data in 2022, but I know the total is FDI is 224, but I'm sure the intra-ASEAN would be around 20 to 30 billion. So this is another potential if we want to increase FDI in ASEAN region. So not only that we want to see the increase from the outside ASEAN, but we would like to see also how this intra-ASEAN region can be boosted. And what is good with the intra-ASEAN region, it will enhance collaboration amongst ASEAN nations.
Thank you, Pak David. And we mentioned about how there are opportunities and there are an increase in FDI inflow to the ASEAN countries. In Pak David and Bumita's view, how do these countries can boost their opportunities to boost their capabilities to catch these opportunities that's being presented right now? Perhaps for Bumita.
Thank you. So I think right now most of the countries are, most of the economies even, are not transitioning towards more sustainable and greener growth. So I think it's important for industry and also for corporations to be adaptable to those new trends. And I think when it comes to investment right now, I think there's a lot of discussion about the ESG sort of investment, and lots of countries as well as institutions are actually thinking about investing in those green sectors. So I think the importance that to do right now is to really be able to adapt to the new trend. In terms of our homework behind the borders, in terms of to attract investment, I think it is also the task of the government to be sending a good signal about our readiness to facilitate investment, especially investment that has to do with more strategic sectors, like Pak Nurul Ikhwan mentioned previously, about the EV as well as for the battery. I think those are new sectors that can be new sources of growth. I think we also need to have inclusive, decisive, and supportive sort of regulation, meaning that our regulation should be clear to investors, so that way they will be able to understand and to see the risk beforehand. We also should provide fiscal incentives as well as, of course, political commitment to ensure that those investments will be well served in the strategic sectors that we have to offer.
Thank you, Bumita. What about Pak David? What's your 2 cents on the issue?
Yeah, I think one way to increase investment, FDI, in Southeast Asian region, and in particular, this sector where I'm currently working on in ASEAN BAC Indonesia Chairmanship, is one of the legacy project, which is called ASEAN Business Entity. So in ASEAN Business Entity, we plan to acknowledge the ASEAN originated corporation, and we want to incentivize them so that they can do more in ASEAN countries, in ASEAN region. So the idea is that we want to create something from ASEAN to ASEAN. By incentivizing this ASEAN business entity, they will invest more in ASEAN region. And if all these ASEAN member state corporation and business players invest in each other, this will further boost collaboration amongst the ASEAN nation.
Okay, Pak David, is there any correlations between geopolitical conflicts that's taking place worldwide to the trends that you've been sharing just now?
Yes, of course. I think all businessmen, they would love to see stability. They would love to see certainty. So obviously with what happening with the global geopolitical has indirectly benefit the Southeast Asian region. Like what Pak Wamen said, of course we don't want to rejoice over some conflict in part of the world, but the blessing in disguise is because of that. ASEAN which is one of the few regions we are free from geopolitical tension, has benefited. And all this stability and peaceful stance in ASEAN has been driving faster than average GDP growth compared to global peers. Next year, we will have new leadership in most of the ASEAN member states. And we're really hoping, as a business player, to see that this peace and stability to continue going forward.
Thank you, Pak David. And Bumita, because this year Indonesia is the chairman of ASEAN, and what can Indonesia do to stabilize the investment climate and improve investment climate in ASEAN region currently?
So I think one important event that Indonesia is going to host in parallel with the summit this year will be the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum. As many know, the notion of Indo-Pacific contains many narratives, but I think the main narrative of ASEAN is contained in a document called the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, which contains one important principle, which is inclusivity. So working together with all of the external partners, ASEAN is looking forward to actually have inclusive collaborations with all of the partners that wishes to be part of ASEAN's growth. Now, the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific itself will be implemented in the forum by way of discussion of important issues such as digitalization, green sectors, as well as innovative and sustainable financing. I think when it comes to getting those growth, I think we have to also ensure that financing is available, especially innovative and sustainable financing. We will also be inviting leaders, mostly leaders from our dialogue partners, to attend this meeting. So this is not just to have concrete projects and concrete deliverables by having all those events to attract investment, but we also like to hear about how those major powers, those big countries, are actually seeing the Indo-Pacific with ASEAN as the driver, in the driver's seats. The notion of ASEAN centrality is important in this event because the forum itself is being done by ASEAN, especially under Indonesia's chairmanship, and we hope to bring together everyone to ensure that this region remains stable, peaceful, and of course stable, prosperous in the future, in line with our theme of ASEAN epicentrum of growth.
Thank you so much, Bumita, for the explanation. And to conclude this session, Pak David, can you please tell us a little bit about the investment forecast for 2023, given the uncertainties globally right now?
I think I would be very bullish for the year 2023 going forward, both for ASEAN region and also for Indonesia. And in particular for Indonesia, I believe that we have a different situation compared to decades back. Right now, you know, we are in the current account surpluses. The currency, that's why the currency are more resilient, and also a majority of our debt instrument are held domestically. In terms of the capital market, majority of the investment are also coming from the retail, which is domestic. And with the young population, with the increasing digital connectivity, and also with the increasing consumption, I believe that Indonesia will remain very prospective for the next decades ahead.
Thank you, Pak David. Let's put a pin on the previous answers as we must now move on to the next session. I would like to remind you all to please send in your questions through the Q&A box in Zoom. And don't forget to mention the name of the panelist that you'd like to ask. Before we move to the next segment of the show, I would like to please ask you all to fill our feedback form through the link on the chat box. For those of you joining us by Zoom, filling out the form will also ensure that you will get a certificate of participation. And now we've come to the most awaited part of this webinar. So we've read all of your questions in the Q&A box, and we are more than happy to answer them together with our panelists. So first, for Pak David, how can investors actively participate and benefit from these cross-border partnerships to drive economic growth and innovation?
How can, sorry, can you repeat that again?
How can investors actively participate participate and benefit from the cross-border partnerships to drive economic growth and innovation in ASEAN region?
Okay, that's a very general questions, but I think investor can benefit the most by like following closely what is the development of each of the ASEAN region and look for opportunities. Like Ibu Mita said, there are few sectors that are attractive, but actually the most attractive sector is the green sector, yeah, the sustainability. And it's not only electric vehicle or battery production. There is many others. Like I mean, of course, like if you talk about electric vehicle or downstreaming, this is like a very big capex. So only like very big investors that can participate. But other than that, there are also other like smaller, more accessible, more affordable investment, which is like, for example, like in the garbage recycling, or maybe like, for example, in seaweed processing, or even like there, Pak Mohamed mentioned about 21 commodities. Like, for example, there coconut. Coconut is also very potential. I think Indonesia, every day we produce about 3 to 4 million every day coconuts, or maybe more, maybe 10. I don't remember, but there are a lot of things that can be made from coconut, and this opportunity is available even for the MSME. Yeah, so definitely, I think again, just to conclude, basically by paying attention, look at the development, and find the most attractive opportunity according to our capability.
Thank you, Pak David, for the very interesting insights. And next, for Bumita, we have a question regarding Indonesia has always espoused very practical and level-headed policies through the years. But we are in a very different time, coming from unprecedented economic slowdown with the war in Ukraine and climate crisis in the mix. So what is Indonesia as the chairman and the ASEAN member states doing differently in 2023 to leverage ASEAN's stability, rich natural resources, and capability to attract investments?
Okay. So I've mentioned before about one of the event, actually the flagship event that we're going to do this year. This is actually also the inaugural event. So the first time ever ASEAN is actually doing a forum together to discuss about how to connect ASEAN better with countries in the Indo-Pacific, especially those that are our external partners as well as our dialogue partners. This event itself will also discuss issues that are of common concern, which was also previously mentioned by Pak David, such as digital transformation, as well as issues such as the green growth, green sector, and its innovative financing. Now, what makes it different is because this time here, this is not just government speaking to each other, but it's actually a public-private dialogue, meaning that we are engaging all the major companies in the region to be part of this process, so we can also hear from them, so we can also see their perspective about the region. Another session also that I also mentioned that was important is about the attendance of the leaders from the external partner countries. Hopefully we'll see some of the leaders from the East Asian countries who are longtime partners of ASEAN to also speak about how to connect ASEAN better with the Indo-Pacific. I think previously we've had what we call the ASEAN Business Investment Summit, which is organized by ABAC. So now we're elevating it more further by having this more comprehensive as well as more targeted discussion about issues of common concern for the Indo-Pacific, in which ASEAN hopefully will be the epicentrum of growth.
Thank you, Bumita. And this is an interesting question for both Pak David and Bumita. Is Indonesia only interested in major players providing high capital FDI, or is Indonesia actually also interested in smaller levels of foreign investment? Maybe Pak David can give an insight about it.
Yeah, I think I think Indonesia should be interested in investment in all kind of like levels. Yeah, I mean not only the big capex like national scale investment, but also there are so many other opportunities. Like for example, professionally, I work as a partner in a venture capital called East Ventures. In East Ventures, we support entrepreneurs, basically in doing their startup. So, and all of this, they start from a small entrepreneurial scale. And even there's a lot of mid to medium small enterprises that become a big corporation. Yeah, so yeah, definitely all level of investment should be interested.
Thank you, Pak David. And another interesting question for Bumita. It's about ASEAN as an alternative destination for investors looking to avoid geopolitical tensions. If China continues to invest heavily in ASEAN, is there any chance that this will weaken ASEAN's neutrality as FDI destination for Western countries?
So interestingly, those that are interested in investing in ASEAN is actually a lot of countries. Most of the external partners that we are engaged with are actually interested in investing in ASEAN and working together with ASEAN. So I think in terms of the way ASEAN deals with all of its partners, we're trying to make this region inclusive. So it is open for anyone who wishes to collaborate, and we do not provide a specific, or we provide certain better treatment to others. I think we're treating it the same. So it will be difficult to say that we are geared towards certain countries or certain major power, because ASEAN believes in inclusivity when it comes to cooperation and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Bumita. And next, question for Pak David. And what is the impact of the industrial sector in Indonesia with foreign investors coming to the country right now?
What's the impact of the industrial sector with foreign investors coming?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a very general question again, but yeah, well, I believe with more investment, the scale of the industrialization should only get bigger, and I think yeah, there is a lot of opportunity as well. If we talk about the industrialization. You know, Indonesia recently came from already executed omnibus law, which is like is a very positive to support industrialization, and I believe is a good step forward for Indonesia to further increase its industrialization.
Thank you, Pak David. We shortly talk briefly about Indonesia's role being a chairman this year. And could you both elaborate on the exact collaborative initiatives that Indonesia is brewing right now to foster among member states from this year's ASEAN Summit?
Yeah, so this year, as Indonesia ASEAN Indonesia chairmanship have 5 priority agenda, which is the digital transformation, health resilience, sustainability, trade and investment facilitation, and also they come with the 8 legacy program, which is digital QR code, closed loop circular economy for MSME, carbon center of excellence and net zero initiative, ASEAN business entity, and one shot campaign. And through all these 5 agenda and 8 legacy program, we're looking forward to make ASEAN even more stronger, and to ensure that ASEAN remain attractive, yeah, for the next decade, and can be epicentrum of global growth.
Thank you so much, Pak David. And in that note about the ASEAN Summit, Bumita, what are the short-term impacts that we can expect from this year's ASEAN Summit?
The short-term impacts towards ASEAN or towards Indonesia?
Towards ASEAN.
Oh, towards ASEAN, okay. I think the summit itself will be, again, a result of hard work of many of the ASEAN processes, including from the technical level until the summit level. And I think in terms of the commitment, we believe that the outcome of this summit will be very much a showcase of the commitment of even at the leaders level to advance some of the very critical issues about ASEAN, such as I mentioned before, the digital transformation, including the ones on EV, which is the Leaders' Declaration on Developing Regional Electric Vehicle Ecosystem. We'll also be seeing some outcome related to food security, especially working between ASEAN and some of these external partners who have many sources of grains and wheats and important staple food. So there will be a lot of outcomes coming from the summit, which of course will strengthen collaboration between ASEAN and its external partners. And we hope that the impact will actually not just be short-term, but also long-term.
Thank you, Bumita. And we actually have quite a lot of questions. And the next one will be for Pak David. Is there an impact on the agricultural sector in Indonesia with foreign investors coming to the country?
Yeah, of course, there is impact. Yeah. I mean, Indonesia have a great soil and weather. And do you know that? I think everybody know that Indonesia is one of the world's largest palm oil producer. We also actually produce a lot of rice, soybeans, and not only the agriculture, but also the aquaculture and seafoods. So definitely there is a lot of potential for investment here, and definitely with the foreign investment coming to Indonesia, this will further increase the prospect of the sector.
Thank you so much, Pak David. And we have been talking about all the positive things that's going on in ASEAN and about the excitement of being the ASEAN chairman this year. And aside from the positive impacts, do you reckon there are any negative impacts that's taking place at the moment? What about like the challenge and the most highlighted challenge that's we are facing this year and maybe in the foreseeable future? Perhaps for Bumita, can you share? Yeah.
In terms of challenge, I think, like I mentioned before, since many of the economies are now moving towards sustainability and more greener economy, I think the challenge really itself is to gear ourselves to be able to adapt to these new trends. In one of the discussion that we are probably having later on in the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum is about how to do upskilling and reskilling of labor. I think that is one important issue that hopefully we can address, so to be up to the challenge as well. Another issue that's also important is how we can channel, all of these pandemic pent-up demand, especially that most of the countries right now are experiencing what we call, the hype of going outside to experience concerts, to experience, art movements and such. So there's a lot of interest in providing all these services to the newer generation and all those people who are probably within the past 2 years have been coped up at home. So there will be also some discussion about how to provide new services in terms of experience economy, tourism, and also travel, and as well as for creative economy to be actually meeting with the new demands that people have after those 2 years of pandemic. So I think those are some of the challenges that we have, and we need to discuss them rightfully with all the stakeholders later on in ASEAN.
Thank you so much, Bumita. And for our last question for both of our panelists, to Pak David and Bumita, of course, the exciting themes and discussion would revolve around the challenges and how can we better adapt to those challenges. And the next one is about a competition between the ASEAN countries right now. So is it true that the ASEAN countries nowadays is racing with each other to get high-end technology, for example, for their industries from investors from the Western countries? And what about the competition with China? And could ASEAN get out from China's influence? Or is there any aim to get out of that situation right now? Perhaps Pak David can share your insights on the issue.
Yeah, I think competition will always be there, whether it's on the country level, on the regional level, or like on the global level. But I think it is more important for today that we took this opportunity as the ASEAN region as a whole to do a more collaboration. So that we better to focus on each of our core strength of each country and do something together for the greater good. I think this is very key for going forward to make sure that ASEAN region remain competitive. Yeah, so competitive towards globally, but within ASEAN, collaboration is the key. Yeah, and also I would like to add that peace and stability is also essential for us to remain attractive in the global investment destination as the destination for FDI.
Thank you, Pak David. Bumita, please.
I think Pak David has rightly said about there will always be competition among us, but I think this is where ASEAN as an organization actually can serve all of us better, because this is the forum or the house in which all of the ASEAN members can get together and decide what sort of collaboration we can actually get. For example, for the ASEAN Leaders Declaration on developing regional electric vehicle ecosystem, one of the discussion is about how to create ASEAN as a production hub for EV, and how we can actually connect all those hubs that are making parts to become ASEAN as the center for the production of EV. So I think this is one of the reasons why we have ASEAN, and I think ASEAN has served well in finding the type of sector or type of collaboration that we can do together, so that way our competitiveness is not just individual competitiveness, but also a regional competitiveness that could further help and also support the larger Indo-Pacific and even global supply chain.
Okay, thank you so much, Bumita. And it's really interesting talking about the EV hub because Indonesia is currently aiming to become one. And you talked about creating an EV hub perhaps for ASEAN. What's your take on that? Is there any regulation or any coordination that's been taking place to make that a reality?
So in terms of at the G2G level, we have what we call the ASEAN Leaders Declaration, but also at the business level, that's why we have the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum. This is where we actually invite all the businesses to talk together about how we can synergize together. And I think for the IPIF, we will be inviting several stakeholders and businesses who are in the field of EV, not just from the production parts, but also from the resources, meaning that what sort of resources that probably we can get from other countries outside of ASEAN that can actually be contributing to our production hub, and what sort of company actually has interest in investing in ASEAN, and what sort of plan we have in the near future in developing this production hub. So we cannot just have government speaking on this with regulation, but we also have to bring all the businesses as well as all of the stakeholders to sit together and to look about the future of this EV industry for ASEAN.
Thank you so much, Ibu. And for Pak David, regarding the EV hub still, what is on top of your mind? What is the single biggest challenge for ASEAN to realize this EV hub?
I think the biggest challenge is the time to basically construct all this smelter and EV battery supply chain, and also the challenge is how to connect the supply chain across the ASEAN. So obviously there are a lot of homework to be done, but I believe that our government in Indonesia and government in each of the ASEAN member states are working collaboratively to make this a dream a reality. And I think if this can happen, it will be very strong, and it will bring all the ASEAN member states together closer to work something together in harmony.
Thank you so much, Pak David and Bumita, for the insightful session that we are having today. On that note, we must end today's discussion because unfortunately we have run out of time. So I would like to thank our guest speakers for their insights today. Thank you so much, Pak David and Bumita. We would also like to thank the Ministry of Investment for sponsoring today's show. For those of you joining us via Zoom, look out for the certificate of participation on your inbox shortly. In the meantime, this is your host, Divya Kariza in Jakarta, signing off. Thank you so much for your participation.